All right. So, Russ, what we're talking about today should be close to your heart. You keep discovering that you're actually a native to Racine, and you didn't even know it, did you?
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's like
because
old home
I start
time.
diving into the history of places,
Yep.
and I get surprised at every turn.
But let's not tell them what the surprise is.
No.
Let's get into it here, and we'll be right back. We're going to tell you a little bit about the village of Elmwood Park, but that's not the surprise. We'll get to that in a minute. Be right back.
Yeah. Here we go.
Well, so Russ, you started digging into Elmwood Park because that's our subject for today, is the village of Elmwood Park, which is part of the city of Racine area.
Yeah, so there's quite a few surprises actually in Elmwood Park.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of the demographics. Because first of all, where is it? Let's talk about where is it located near Racine?
Well, between Lathrop and Taylor.
Yeah, pretty tight area too. And
Yeah.
it's right between Lathrop and Taylor, and it is a very small area.
It is the smallest village where, in actual fact, after they qualified as a village,
Yep.
they changed the rules. So if
Well,
they
they
were
had
applying
started the
for it now,
process.
they would never.
They had already
be called a
begun the
village.
application
Yeah.
process, which is why they were able to become a village. If they had not already started the application process with the state of Wisconsin, they would not have been allowed because of their size.
The state changed the rules after
Yeah.
that, and the size matters in
Size
whether-
matters to a village anyway.
To a village, yeah. So because they're so small, I mean
Yeah.
it's 0.14 of
Okay, and so
square miles.
and so just to give you guys some perspective, that is 1/8, just over 1/8 of a square mile, because 0.125 would be an eighth of a square mile.
Yeah.
So 0.14 is so little over that. It's really not much more than an eighth of a square mile.
Yeah.
And that's just an incredibly small area
It
to
is.
be considered its own little municipality, its own little village, and it very much is.
It used to be part of Mount Pleasant, and they
Yes.
fought tooth and nail to hold on to it, but
Yep.
they prevailed and they became a village.
Well, let's talk a little bit about where it's named from, why the names are there, what some of the history is. So, first of all, it's Lathrop and Taylor. So, Lathrop, we know that's kind of from that section of that road is named because of the section over by Manry Park because of Washington Avenue and Taylor.
Well,
And Lathrop.
Lathrop was actually named after a person, A.H.
Correct.
Lathrop.
But that was more about his holdings over by Washington.
In
over on
that
Washington
area, he
area.
owned a
Right.
quarter of it, and
So even though
he-
Lathrop Road was named after him, he really
Yeah.
has no effect on Elmwood Park at all.
no,
It's it has nothing to do with him. It's just that Lathrop happens to be one of the roads that is there. So, one of the roads, but basically it's kind of like the intersection of Taylor and Lathrop and then a little bit back on Taylor. Not really down Lathrop.
but Taylor Avenue hasn't always been Taylor Avenue.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, it's a little bit like Sturtevant, where it had a name change every 5 minutes. So did Taylor Avenue.
Well, and if you want to know what he's talking about, if you haven't seen our other video, go back and watch the video on Sturtevant, and that is
What it used to be called, and what
how
it's
many
called now.
names does Sturtevant have?
Yeah.
And so
And this is a similar thing. So
Especially for
before
such a
it was
small area.
Taylor Avenue, it was actually Racine and Wilmot Plank Road. That's what it began like.
and if you remember from when we were talking about some of the earlier stuff for Manry Park, we were talking about Plank Road because the
Yeah.
Washington was the first Plank Road. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when they hear the term Plank Road, they think, oh, it's just the name of a road, because there are still roads that are
Yeah, there
named
is
Plank Road.
still.
They
Yeah.
don't understand that in reality that was a description.
Yeah, it was actually built of planks.
Yes, wooden planks were laid out, and that just made the road so much more stable.
Yeah.
And it was like the first roads, instead of doing asphalt or concrete or any of those things,
Yeah.
the first stable roads were actually made out of planks of wood.
Prior to that, it was just like
tracks.
Dirt roads.
Yeah, like dirt roads with tracks, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem with a dirt road and tracks is that the more you drive on it, the deeper those ruts get, and it gets worse and worse. So that's why the
Yeah.
first iteration became like plank roads, were the
Yep.
first kind of formal roads. And
Yeah.
Taylor Avenue happened to be one of them, but it was called Racine and
Racine,
Wilmot.
which also described where it went from and where it went to.
Exactly, because Wilmot is out in the county, out in Kenosha
And it
County.
went from Racine to,
To
Wilmot.
Wilmot, right.
So that was that was the Racine Wilmot Plank Road.
Right. So if you wanted to get from Racine to Wilmot, you took that road.
Took that road. Then it shortened the name to Wilmot Road. Just
Which is
Wilmot
very
Road,
confusing
so,
because
yeah.
we still have Wilmot Road down in Kenosha.
Yes, we do.
So, which is Highway C down in Kenosha.
Uh-huh.
It's the County Road C now. So,
Yep.
Yep,
And
so-
then it was named Asylum Avenue.
okay. And this is really interesting because when I first saw that it said asylum, I kind of thought, oh no, it was like Elmwood Park is like an insane asylum, or like,
Yeah.
was it like were there people that were really, in a lot of distress and mental illness and stuff like that? But actually, no.
It was still, at that time, it was still out in the county, as it was considered
The
being
county.
the countryside.
Yes. But it wasn't for insane people.
No.
It wasn't an
It
insane
was
asylum.
for orphans.
It was an orphan asylum.
Yeah, so Isaac Taylor, which is where Taylor Avenue comes from now,
Right.
he started an orphanage asylum.
Well, and he did it after his wife died, which is
No, his wife.
Oh, his wife did it
he
after.
died.
Sorry, his wife did it after he died. But
She renamed it
after him,
Taylor Avenue.
well, she renamed the orphanage
Yes.
after him because, and this is where the connection to Russ comes in.
He had previously been an orphan.
What do you mean previously?
England.
He was an orphan, not
Yeah.
previously. You don't be
Well,
previously. You
Well,
either
he's
are
not an
or aren't.
orphan when he was married and all that. Well, I suppose he was.
You're still an orphan.
But he was an orphan from the UK, from England. And so he'd grown up as an orphan in England and come to America
Yeah.
and decided to put back into the community by starting an orphanage.
And it was his dream. His wife
Yeah.
fulfilled it, but it was his dream.
Yeah.
And his name was Isaac Taylor. And of course, with the funds, basically the Taylor Children's Orphan Asylum was completed in 1868. That's got to be one of the earliest orphan
Yeah.
asylums in America, and definitely in Wisconsin. I mean, there might have
Yeah.
been some in New York, but wow, in Wisconsin, that's really
Yeah.
early, in 1868.
Yeah, so that ran and all the way up until, it's another surprise to me, they made it illegal to have orphanages.
Yes, you didn't know it was illegal to have
No.
orphanages in Wisconsin.
No.
Yep, in 1955, it's no longer legal to have an orphan asylum, basically, or an orphanage. Yeah.
Why?
Well, because there were a lot of things that happened in orphanages and orphan asylums that weren't very good in various places.
Right.
They were not run very well, some of them. Some of the early ones were usually run really well. And because they were, especially the ones that were founded by people who were orphans, like Isaac Taylor
Yeah,
and his
they
wife.
knew the
They knew the
pitfalls,
pitfalls.
yeah.
They knew the pain of the children and things like that. And their whole goal was to relieve that pain. Unfortunately, 100 years later, some of the people running those kind of institutions were doing it for the money. They were doing it for the benefits, and they were not necessarily taking care of the children.
See, I had friends growing up that I went to school with that lived in orphanages.
Yeah.
And they would be small homes, but like, I suppose large homes, but small orphanages.
Yes.
Where you would have like a dozen kids
Yeah.
in them.
And see, that's not a typical orphanage. A typical orphanage is going to be more like Oliver Twist,
Yeah, yeah.
which of course those were really
That
bad.
was the workhouses.
But those were like orphanages because
Yeah.
they lived there, they worked there, so, none, they weren't all orphans. But anyway, going back to the Taylor Children's Orphan Asylum, the road was named Asylum Avenue for a while. And then finally in 1923, so this is like almost like 50 plus years after his death, or after 50 plus years after his death, because the asylum opened in 1868 and he died before it opened. And, and then it was 1923 when it got renamed
Yeah,
in honor of him.
1923 it was
so
named
that's why I
after.
think that he must have been a really good man, and his wife must have been a really good woman to have helped these kids, because
Yeah.
you don't go naming roads after people who aren't really decent people.
No.
So yeah.
So it was, they built the asylum, the orphanage asylum,
Well, they had their
with
farm. They had
funds
their own
from
farm.
his estate.
Well, and they had their own farm there. They
Yeah.
grew their own vegetables and raised their own animals, and
yeah, they
really
had cows,
gave the kids
pigs, chickens.
really gave the
and-
kids like a country lifestyle, which was really good for them to be able to grow up in a healthy
Yeah.
country lifestyle. So
And it was more economically viable if they're growing their own produce.
absolutely,
They feed themselves.
And here's the thing about this is that where it was is where the city hall or the village hall is now.
Yes.
Which is right on Taylor Avenue. Now the buildings are not what the asylum was. They're completely different buildings. Those
Although it
buildings
was
were
used
raised.
for a similar purpose.
It was at
after.
first. It was
Yeah.
at first. After it was shut in 1955,
Mm-hmm.
then for a while it was, but then they raised the buildings, and in the 1960s built the actual village buildings that are there right now.
Yeah, they built the village buildings first. In actual fact,
Well, that's true, and
'cause
then
they
they
built
raised
them
the
in
old-
1960, and then raised the
old one in
old building
1973. Yeah,
in
that's
73.
true.
Yeah,
That's true. And even Lathrop Avenue, though, there was a real estate developer in the early 1900s that tried to
Oh,
rename
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And apparently he must not have been a very good guy because, sadly, bad real estate broker.
yeah. It
apparently.
didn't sound the same, though, did it? I mean, he wanted to call it Ben Bones Street.
Yeah, Lathrop Avenue. No, I think Lathrop Avenue sounds so much better than
Yeah.
Ben Bones. And and it was being named after a vegetable farmer. It
Yeah.
just makes you go, what kind of deal did he have with that veggie farmer that he wanted to name a whole road after him? That's kind
Yeah.
of crazy. But as this village developed, as Elmwood Park developed, people planted an elm tree.
Yeah, as more people moved into the area and they built houses in the area, one of the village rules was that they plant a couple of elm trees.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
Of course, if any of you that know anything about this area, you've got the Dutch-
any area, because
Well, yeah,
we had
that's
it
true.
in the UK as well.
That's true.
Dutch elm disease.
Yes.
And that put paid to a lot of the trees, unfortunately.
Yeah. There's very few to no elm trees anymore.
There's a few left there.
There's a
now.
few, but they're really heavily monitored because they don't want them to completely go away if they can.
No.
But only a few remain today because they actually cut a bunch of them down just to stop the spread of the Dutch elm
Yeah.
disease. So a lot of it had to be cut down. But it actually incorporated as a village in 1960.
Yeah, so
So-
not long ago, really, in the
No.
scheme of things.
No, it's not been that long ago that it actually, and that's when it actually had its name. But it couldn't be. It was actually just called Elmwood. But
Yeah.
when they incorporated, they had to call it Elmwood Park because
There was another village called Elmwood in
over in the
Wisconsin.
western side,
Yeah,
on the western side of Wisconsin. So we couldn't have two villages of Elmwood apparently in the state of Wisconsin.
yeah, it wasn't allowed.
So they had to change it to Elmwood Park, which is still fine.
yeah,
So but for such a small area, now keep in mind, this is like an eighth of a square mile of space.
Yeah.
All right. And yet, one of the most famous people somebody that people everywhere know about.
yeah. All
lived
over
there.
the world.
Yeah, all over the world. People know this person, and he lived and built that community in
Yeah.
the 50s and 60s and was part of the whole, let's make this into a village of Elmwood Park. And that was
Dremel.
W.E. Dremel. Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you that know what a Dremel tool is, in fact, we use the term a Dremel even if it's not a Dremel brand.
Yeah,
We
because
still use for
it's
that
become so famous all
Yes,
over.
for those rotating small tools.
Anybody with one of those small rotating tools.
Yep.
Well,
They still
even
call
my
them-
saw is a Dremel.
Well, that's actually the brand of a Dremel. That's
Yeah.
an oscillating saw, but
'Cause they
but the
don't just
rotating
do
one.
those, but-
well, they developed more tools, but their original,
But the mini drill,
the spinning one is that spinning one is what they're known for. In fact, when I was looking him up, I came across some other things that had the word Dremel in it. And I was like, well, no, I'm looking about W.E. Dremel and learning a little bit about him, and came up things like, if you want to Dremel your dog's nails. And I was like, no, well, that's not what I was looking for. But it's interesting because I don't know that they actually use his specific tool, but really world famous person And he actually was instrumental in developing Elmwood Park.
Yeah, and was actually the first constable.
Yes.
In Elmwood Park.
Cracking the whip on the people of Elmwood Park. Make sure they don't, don't get themselves in trouble. But then, having said that, the population, that couldn't have been too difficult of a job, because in 2020, the population was only 510 people.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine in 1960 that it was a huge amount. He probably knew everybody there and all their kids.
Yeah.
It was probably close to 200 people back when it incorporated. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as of the 2020 census, there was only 510 people.
Yeah. But here's the thing about Elmwood Park that I think people should pay attention to, especially on the real estate side of things. The median age in the 2020 census was 63.3 years old.
Yeah, which when you look 10 years prior to that, the median age was 48.9. So it's really gone up.
Yes. So what happens is, and I will say, Elmwood Park is one of those places where people go to kind of retire into a nice, spacious ranch home. To be honest, spacious ranch homes, that's what that whole area is like. And even the places that aren't specifically Elmwood Park, like we sold one that's literally on, it's a Green Meadow, and it's one block off of Lathrop and Taylor. And so it's really like not even a block and a half away from where Elmwood Park is, but it's very indicative and very much the same kind of house.
Yeah.
Big, sprawling ranch-style homes, 1,800 square feet. This particular house had a pool, which was, to be honest, there were quite a few of them that had in-ground pools over there. Still are. Some of them have been filled in over the years, but there's still quite a few over there that are these large in-ground pools, and they were the places that people went in the 60s and 70s, and kind of settled in their later years. They weren't the starter homes. They were your upgrade. This is where we're going to finish raising our family and have the grandkids around for
Well, there's
Christmas
actually
dinner.
Only 208 homes in
Exactly. There's
Elmwood
only
Park.
there's
And
only
three of those are unoccupied.
Right.
So currently we have 205 occupied houses in
How did you know three
Elmwood
were
Park.
unoccupied?
Because that's what I do. I research.
That's crazy. That's crazy detailed researching there, Russ.
Yeah.
So, so there's 208 homes. 205 are occupied. 3 are empty. 3 are not.
Now the makeup is about level. So we've got
50-50
yeah,
male,
it's
female.
about 50-50 male female.
Yeah.
Another
that's
surprising
more-
fact though
I think it's probably more from the fact that it's mostly couples that live there, and occasionally one of the spouses dies and leaves the other one still living there. And so that's why you might have a little, I bet it flip-flops back and forth between 49 women, 50 men, 49 men, 50
if
women.
you're getting close to 85 and you're male, be worried. Because in actual fact, in the village,
if you live in
Elmwood Park, there are over 100 women that live over past 85.
Right.
Only 3 men survive.
So the women have a tendency to live longer in Elmwood Park. So men,
Definitely.
if your wife wants to move you to Elmwood Park for retirement, beware.
Beware, be afraid.
Be very afraid. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost half of it is the ancestry is German.
Yeah.
And we've got some Italian, Polish, English, Irish, kind of a good
And
mix
they were
after
all
that.
about the same, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I could say the English, you would include the Irish in that, so that would be
Some people would.
14%.
Depends on what kind of Irish they are.
We come second in
Whatever.
that one.
You just want to. You don't know. Maybe they're Irish. Maybe they're not Great British Irish.
We all belong to Britain at one point.
No, I'm not condoning his viewpoint of the Irish. No.
We crop up everywhere.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that's really interesting. I mean, for such a tiny little area to have had such an impact on this region.
It's really interesting, you find out all this stuff. It's really cool looking into the history of these villages.
Yeah, because we didn't, and part of it is neither of us grew up here. Of course, if you've seen our intro video, neither of us grew up in this area, but we do love it. And finding out these really cool facts is a lot of fun.
It's really interesting because I looked at it And I said to Kimberly earlier, I said, so what's the subject for the video today? And she said, Elmwood Park. And I thought, what am I going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about? It's so tiny,
It's
and
such
yet
a
here
tiny
we are.
area. And there we are. I look up this stuff and I get an explosion of information.
Yeah.
Historical
Racine
information.
continues
that's
to surprise us.
Yeah, it really does.
Just keep surprising us over and over. So hopefully, guys, this has helped you today. We'd love to know, would you love to live in a village that is that small? Because obviously you got a little bit of village politics going on in really tiny places like that. And, would you want to live in some area that is very, very small like that? So let us know in the comments below. What do you think? Would you want to live in a village that's only 1/8 of a square mile? That's
Well,
pretty
you'd
tiny.
certainly have an impact with the government of the village.
I guess it's like,
You
honestly,
could
there
really-
are subdivisions that are bigger than that.
Yeah, I know.
It's about this.
Yeah.
It's not even a whole subdivision, really.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But do us a favor, click like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content, and let us know what you think, or ask us another question if you have something about Elmwood Park you want to know. Yeah, so let us know what you think about Elmwood Park and about it being so small. Would you want to live in a really small little village like that? And, they are really cool houses, but the vast majority of them were built in the 60s.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the houses over there were built in the 60s and the 70s. And, like we said, there's only a couple hundred houses there. So, and they're not very much the same, but they are mostly ranch style houses.
Yeah.
There's just a couple that are 2-story, not very many. So yeah, let us know. What do you think? Would you want to live in a village as small as Elmwood Park? But if you found any value from this content, do us a favor, click like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. And join us again next week for Living in Racine.
Bye for now.
Bye.